Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive, and this time we're tackling a topic that I think we can all relate to on some level. Are you being used in a relationship? You guys sent in this source, The User's Game, 7 Signs Your Woman is Using You. And while it focuses on, women as the potential manipulator in straight relationships, I think we can all agree that manipulation can show up in any relationship. Right?
Absolutely.
So we're going to get into all of it, from the common causes and those sneaky signs of manipulation, all the way to real-life examples, and most importantly, how to break free from these unhealthy patterns. And to help us unpack all of this, we've got our expert here with us today. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
So one thing that really stood out to me in this source was this idea that past trauma can actually be a driving force behind manipulative behavior. I mean, that's a pretty intense concept.
Yeah, it is. And it's interesting how the source connects it to 3 other major causes of emotional manipulation. Low self-esteem, fear of abandonment, and in more extreme cases, narcissistic personality disorder.
Okay, so let's break that down. Low self-esteem and fear of abandonment. Those feel like pretty relatable insecurities.
Right.
Oh yeah, for sure. But how does this actually lead to someone becoming manipulative?
Well, think about it this way. Someone who struggles with low self-esteem might constantly need validation from others, to try and boost their own sense of worth. So they might use manipulative tactics, like guilt tripping or playing the victim, just to get their partner to constantly reassure them or to cater to their needs,
So it's almost like it's not necessarily malicious, but it's more about trying to make up for their own insecurities.
Exactly. And then the past trauma thing, that adds another layer. Imagine someone who experienced some serious trauma, maybe abuse or neglect in the past. They might start using manipulation as a way to protect themselves, to avoid feeling vulnerable or being hurt again.
So it's almost like a defense mechanism.
Exactly. For example, someone who's constantly criticized as a kid, they might develop this pattern of manipulating their partner just to avoid any kind of negative feedback, even if it's meant to be constructive, They might deflect blame, twist things around, even get angry, just to avoid feeling that familiar sting of criticism.
Right, it's like their past is shaping how they interact in the present. But even if we can kind of understand the root cause, it doesn't make the behavior okay, right?
Absolutely not. Understanding the reasons behind manipulation, it can help us approach the situation with more empathy, but it doesn't make it any less harmful or acceptable.
Right, for sure. Okay, so let's get into those 7 warning signs from the source. I mean, some of these are so common, it's almost scary, how easily they can fly under the radar, only reaching out when they need something, constantly pushing your boundaries. I feel like we've all encountered those at some point, haven't we?
Oh, absolutely.
Can you give us some real-world examples of how those might play out in a relationship?
Sure, let's take the only reaching out when they need something sign. So picture this. You've got a partner who rarely initiates contact, right? But then suddenly they become super sweet and attentive when they need a favor. Maybe they need to borrow money. Or they try to guilt you into helping them move, something like that. And then as soon as they get what they wanted, poof, they disappear again.
It's like they're only there when it's convenient for them.
Exactly. And then when it comes to disrespecting boundaries, imagine you've explicitly told your partner you need some alone time after work, to decompress, but they just barge into your space, demanding attention, picking fights, or just totally ignoring your need for that personal time. They're basically putting their own wants over your clearly stated needs.
Yeah, and I think we've all had that experience at some point, right? That feeling of having your boundaries crossed. And it's so easy to just brush it off, especially in the beginning of a relationship. But it seems like recognizing these patterns, no matter how subtle, is really important, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. We often make excuses for those behaviors, thinking, it's just how they are, or they'll change. But consistently ignoring your needs and pushing your boundaries, that's not okay. It's disrespectful. And it could be a warning sign of something more manipulative going on.
Right. And speaking of the effects of manipulation, the source goes into some pretty damaging ones. Emotional distress, loss of trust, even damage to your self-esteem. But the one that really hit me was how the loss of trust can actually impact other areas of your life, not just the relationship itself.
Yeah, that's a crucial point. When trust is eroded, it's hard to feel safe and open. Not just with your partner, but with anyone. You might start to doubt yourself, question your judgment, even struggle to form healthy connections in the future.
It's like a ripple effect that goes way beyond that one relationship. So if someone listening is realizing that they might be in this type of manipulative relationship, what can they actually do about it?
Well, the source offers some solutions. And I think open communication is that first crucial step. It's about letting your partner know how their actions are affecting you. But you also have to remember, you can't change someone who's not willing to change themselves.
So it's about being honest and direct, but also realizing you can't force someone to change.
Exactly. And that's where setting boundaries comes in. It's about communicating what you will and won't tolerate. But it's not about being controlling. It's about respecting yourself and your needs.
It's like drawing a line in the sand and
Yeah.
saying, this is where I stand.
Exactly. And I know for some people, setting those boundaries, it can be really tough, especially if they're dealing with someone who's used to getting their way. That's why the source also recommends getting support. Talk to trusted friends, family members, or even a therapist. You don't have to go through this alone.
Right. That's such an important reminder. It can feel so isolating to be in a manipulative relationship, and having that external support can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. And remember, you deserve to be in a relationship that's based on respect, trust, and genuine care. Don't settle for anything less.
I love that. And actually, the source quotes Dr. Stephanie Sarkis, who says that emotional manipulation is a subtle yet insidious form of abuse. That's pretty powerful.
It is. And I think what Dr. Sarkis is highlighting is that recognizing manipulation for what it is, that's the first step to breaking free. Because a lot of times, victims of manipulation don't even realize they're being abused.
Yeah.
Because it's so subtle and gradual.
It's like a slow burn, right? It can be hard to detect until you're already feeling trapped and confused. So let's talk about some real-life examples. The source mentioned this guy named Alex, whose girlfriend Sarah would only contact him when she needed something. He finally realized what was going on and started setting boundaries. What happened next?
So Alex's story, it's a great example of how setting those clear expectations can sometimes, force the manipulator's hand. Like by him standing up for himself and refusing to be taken advantage of, he basically gave Sarah a choice, right? Either respect his boundaries or show her true colors.
So by him standing his ground, he basically exposed the manipulation.
Exactly. And that can be a real turning point in these kinds of relationships. Sometimes the manipulator will back off and start respecting those boundaries, but sometimes they'll actually double down on the manipulation, which can make it even more clear that the relationship isn't healthy.
That makes a lot of sense. So the source also talks about the importance of self-care as a preventative measure. And it sounds simple enough, but it can be tough, especially if you're already feeling drained and emotionally exhausted.
Yeah, and that's where building a strong sense of self-worth comes in. When you truly value yourself and understand your own needs, you're less likely to fall for those manipulative tactics. You're better equipped to see those red flags early on and walk away from situations that aren't good for you.
So it's like having this internal compass that guides you towards healthier relationships and helps you avoid the harmful ones.
Exactly. It's about developing that inner strength and self-awareness that lets you make choices that are good for you and your well-being.
I really like that analogy of having that internal compass. But how can someone actually build that strong sense of self-worth? It sounds like a pretty deep process.
It's a journey, not a destination. It makes a lot of self-reflection, understanding your values, setting personal goals that bring you joy, and surrounding yourself with people who genuinely care about you and want to see you grow.
So it's not just about saying, I love myself, but actually taking action to build that self-love.
Exactly. It's about recognizing your own strengths and what you've accomplished, and not needing validation from others to feel good about yourself. It's about taking care of yourself physically, emotionally, and mentally.
It sounds like a lot of inner work, but in the end, it's really empowering, like you're taking control of your own life and your own happiness.
Exactly. And remember, building self-worth isn't about becoming arrogant or self-centered. It's about having a healthy respect for yourself and your needs. And that allows you to set those healthy boundaries and make choices that are true to who you are.
So if someone's listening to this and realizes they might be in a manipulative relationship, what would you say is the very first step they should take?
The first step is just acknowledging the situation for what it is. A lot of times people in these types of relationships, they deny or downplay the problem because they don't want to face the reality of it.
It's like that saying, the first step to solving a problem is admitting you have one.
Exactly. Once you acknowledge the manipulation, you can start to take steps to protect yourself. This might mean setting those boundaries we talked about, communicating your feelings clearly and assertively, or even reaching out to trusted friends, family, or a therapist for support.
And sometimes it might even mean leaving the relationship entirely, right?
Yes. Sometimes ending the relationship is the healthiest option, especially if the manipulation is severe, or if your partner just isn't willing to change their behavior. It's never easy, but it's important to remember that you deserve to be in a relationship where you're respected, trusted, and genuinely cared for.
It's interesting how so many of the solutions we've discussed come back to communication. It seems like being able to openly and honestly talk about your feelings and needs is crucial in any relationship, but even more so when there's potential manipulation involved.
Absolutely. Communication is the foundation of any healthy relationship. It lets you build trust, resolve conflicts in a healthy way, and truly understand each other.
But how can someone effectively communicate when their partner is manipulative? It seems like manipulators are experts at twisting words and turning things around to get what they want.
You're right, they often are. Manipulative people use communication tactics to avoid responsibility, gaslight their partners, or just avoid being held accountable. But even in those situations, clear and assertive communication is still really important.
So what are some practical tips for communicating effectively in that kind of situation?
One helpful tip is to use I statements. This helps you express how you feel without blaming or accusing your partner. For example, instead of saying, "You always make me feel bad," you could say, "I feel hurt when you do this specific thing."
So it's about owning your own feelings and being specific about what's bothering you.
Exactly. Another tip is to stay calm and avoid getting pulled into arguments. Manipulators love drama and conflict, so try to keep your cool and stick to the facts.
It's like not giving them the ammunition to keep manipulating, right?
Exactly. And if communication completely breaks down, or your partner keeps manipulating you even when you're trying to communicate, that's when getting professional help from a therapist or counselor can be really beneficial. They can give you the tools and strategies to navigate the situation, set those healthy boundaries we discussed, and ultimately protect your emotional well-being.
So going to therapy in these situations isn't a sign of weakness, but actually a sign of strength and self-awareness.
Absolutely. It takes courage to admit you need support, and therapy offers a safe space to process your experiences, develop healthy coping skills, and make choices that are best for you.
You know, we've talked a lot about the signs of manipulation, the causes, the effects, the solutions, but we haven't really gotten into the specific tactics women might use in relationships. Does the source offer any insights on that?
It does give some examples, but it's super important to remember that these tactics aren't exclusive to women. Anyone can use them, regardless of gender. It's about recognizing the behaviors, not making assumptions based on someone's gender.
That's a really good point. So what are some of the tactics the source highlights?
Some common ones are playing the victim, guilt tripping, using ultimatums, withholding affection as punishment, making a ton of demands on their partner's time and energy, or always putting their partner's needs above their own to the point of neglecting themselves.
It's interesting because some of those, like putting their partner's needs first, can seem selfless or even loving at first glance.
That's the tricky thing about manipulation. It often disguises itself as love or concern, which makes it even harder to spot. But healthy relationships are built on reciprocity and respect, not one person constantly sacrificing their needs for the other.
So how can someone tell the difference between genuine care and manipulative self-sacrifice?
You have to look at the overall pattern of behavior and the motivation behind it. If someone is constantly putting their partner's needs first, even when it hurts them, and then uses that to guilt trip or control their partner, that's a red flag.
So it's not the action itself, but the intention behind it.
Exactly. Healthy relationships are about both partners supporting each other's needs and growth, not one person always giving while the other takes.
That's a really important point. It's about balance and mutual respect, not about one person having all the power.
Exactly. And it's also important to remember that recognizing manipulation is an ongoing process. It's not always clear-cut. There will be times when you're not sure if a behavior is manipulative or not.
So what's the best thing to do when you're feeling unsure or confused about a specific behavior?
Trust your gut. If something feels off or uncomfortable in a relationship, don't ignore it. Talk to friends, family, or a therapist to get an outside perspective and figure things out.
That's such a good reminder. We often try to ignore those little doubts because we don't want to face the truth or cause problems.
But sometimes those doubts are our intuition trying to keep us safe.
That's such an important point. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't ignore those red flags.
Exactly. And remember, you deserve to feel safe, respected, and valued in your relationships. Don't settle for anything less.
So to bring it all back to the bigger picture, it seems like being aware of these manipulative tactics, understanding where they come from, and recognizing the signs early on, are all essential tools for building healthier relationships.
You got it. It's like having a toolkit for navigating the complexities of relationships. The more we understand about manipulation, the better we can protect ourselves and build relationships based on honesty, respect, and real connection.
It's like we're not just passively going through our relationships, but we're active participants who can shape our experiences and create the kind of love we want.
Exactly. And it all starts with self-awareness, setting boundaries, and knowing that you're worthy of being treated with respect and kindness.
Now, the source also mentioned a couple of books that might be helpful for people who want to learn more. The Gaslight Effect by Dr. Stephanie Sarkis, and Attached, The New Science of Adult Attachment and How It Can Help You Find and Keep Love by Amir Levine and Rachel S.F. Heller. Have you read either of those?
I have, and I definitely recommend them. For anyone who wants to dive deeper into manipulation, attachment styles, and healthy relationships in general, they have great insights and practical advice that can help people understand themselves better, build stronger relationships, and break free from unhealthy patterns.
They sound like amazing resources. I'll have to add those to my reading list.
I think you'll find them both insightful and empowering.
Well, I feel like we've covered so much ground today, from recognizing the signs of manipulation, to understanding the causes and effects, to coming up with strategies for building healthier, more fulfilling relationships.
Yeah, we've definitely touched on a lot of important aspects of this topic. It's a lot to take in, but hopefully our listeners feel better equipped to deal with these challenges.
Me too. But before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you one last question. Based on your experience and everything you've learned, what's the one piece of advice you would give to someone struggling in a manipulative relationship?
That's a great question. If I had to pick just one thing, I'd say trust your instincts. If something just feels off in your relationship, don't ignore it.
It's like that little voice inside you is trying to tell you something's up.
Exactly. And it might be telling you, maybe you need to get some support or set some boundaries, maybe even walk away from the relationship completely. You deserve to be with someone who respects you, who genuinely cares, who you can trust. Don't settle for anything less.
Wow. That's really powerful. Trust your gut. Set those boundaries. Know your worth. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. It's been really eye-opening.
You're very welcome. Happy to help shed some light on this, this important stuff.
And to all of you listening, thank you for taking this deep dive with us, this topic. I mean, it can be tough, right? But hopefully you're walking away feeling a little more prepared to deal with these kinds of situations. Just remember, knowing how to spot manipulation, that's the first step. It's the first step to healing and building those, those healthy and happy relationships that you deserve. So don't be afraid to ask for help. Set those boundaries. And most importantly, trust yourself. You got this.